Hello and welcome to Red and April Off-Grid. Join us as we build our passive energy home on our off-grid homestead. Well, we're clearing everything off of the concrete slab portion and getting ready to start the floor grind. We will also be working in the guest bathroom, installing the tub and the bathroom cabinets. In the last video, I ground the bathroom floor, and I was using a fine disc that worked really well, but it was slow going. And so when I moved to this bigger space, I decided to try a coarser disc in hopes that it would go faster. Unfortunately, it's a deeper disc, so it sets out farther, and it sets out far enough that this dust catchment hood doesn't quite make contact with the floor. And as you can see here, it's not collecting the dust very well at all. I'm just kind of grinding in a huge billowing cloud. This disc does seem to be working pretty well, but man, this dust is crazy. We do have the evaporative cooler on and some doors open and windows open, so we actually have a lot of ventilation. There's a lot of air circulating through the house, but it's just creating so much dust that it's just surrounding and engulfing me. So I do have really good respiratory protection on right now, and as long as it's tight, it should filter out basically 100% of this dust using a P100 filter. But it's really critical to have the right protection on. You can see it kind of billowing out one of the doors right now. It's crazy the amount of dust this produces. It's a good time to do this since we just finished up with a really dusty drywall process, so we're just making more dust. So that's one of the reasons we decided to do this now, because everything was already messy. With this overhang, we can leave the door open even when it's raining most of the time for ventilation. We've really been getting some nice monsoon rains, and stuff is starting to sprout out. There's parts of the ground that just have a green tone because there's so many plants that are starting to sprout and come up. We've also had a couple nice rains that have put water in the pond already this year, so it's great to be able to capture that water on the property. Well, back to the grind. It's funny, we found out that I could only do this for about 2 hours a day because of my back. And so every day I would do this for 2 hours, so it became the daily grind. Here I'm making a change to the disc setup in an effort to cut down on the dust. I did a little research and found out that it would be safe to take a little plate that's on the inside, kind of up against the bearing on this grinder, and remove that, and so I could get the disc inset deeper. I didn't take it out originally because I didn't know if it would hurt the grinder, but it turns out it's okay. And so I took that out and was able to get the disc recessed a little bit, and hopefully that'll, cut down the gap between the shroud and the floor. Just putting it on now, hand tight. You don't have to tighten it down, it'll tighten itself. You saw the plate there, it's pretty thin, but I hope it'll help. And now I'm kind of looking to see how much it sticks out. Still sticks out about 1/8 of an inch beyond the shroud, but hopefully that'll help. We're about to find out. And I'm putting on my knee pads, getting set up here and starting the daily grind. And it seems to be working out better. It's still producing a lot of dust, but probably, half of what it was producing before. So that was definitely a significant improvement. One thing I'd like to mention here is ear protection. So this grinder is really loud in itself, and just the friction on the concrete, very loud. Also, the vac that I'm running on this is also very loud. So between those two things going right beside me, it's creating a lot of noise. And even though I have earmuffs on, I realized that it was probably too loud. Anything above 85 decibels over an extended period of time can cause permanent hearing damage. And so I think I was probably above that. I've become sensitive to sound levels over time. And so what I decided to do is double up on ear protection. So I went ahead and got some foam earplugs that, you squeeze, roll up, and stick in your ear. And I put those on under the earmuffs. So I have 2 layers of protection on. Now when you do that, you don't get double the protection, unfortunately. The second layer only gives you about half the protection as it would by itself. So by doubling up, I have about 1.5 times the ear protection, and I think I've got it down to below the 85 decibels. It's so good that when I turn everything off and I just have the evaporative cooler going about 4 or 5 feet away, I can't hear the evaporative cooler. So it's good to be conscious of that kind of stuff when you're doing loud work. You may need more than 1 layer of protection. Moving on to the bathroom, April is working on applying the sealing coat to the concrete floor. She had to clean everything off really well, get all the dust vacuumed up and cleaned out really good. And now she's applying the first coat of sealer to the concrete. As you can see, it darkens it up quite a bit. It's looking a little splotchy now, but we ended up putting 3 coats on this floor, and it had a much smoother and kind of even appearance, looked really good. In the next video, if you stay tuned, we'll be showing the finished results of all of the concrete floors in the house. The cabinets that we bought included bathroom cabinets, and a couple of those were perfect for our guest bathrooms, so we set about installing those. In order to do that, I had to do a little rebuilding and a lot of modification to the main base that sits over the plumbing. Unfortunately, the plumbing coming up here is kind of a disaster. It's quite functional, but my inexperience really shows here. It's a mess, and it really made it difficult to fit this cabinet down over it. You can see here I had to do some serious open heart surgery to this cabinet just to get it to fit down over all this plumbing. And then when I was done and had quite a few holes, it actually took us 3 times just to get it to fit down into place. And then I had to come back later and do a lot of patch-up work in order to make the holes in the cabinet smaller. But here you can see in between one of the test fits, I'm making the hole bigger and even bigger, and just keep making the holes bigger until it finally fits. You can see all that plumbing going sideways, just really hard to fit around. Finally, 3rd time here and 3rd time's the charm, it finally fits. There's holes, big holes everywhere, but it fits nice, and this cabinet's really going to look good in this bathroom. Well, it's time for another daily grind. I'm strapping in and getting ready for work here. I've switched to a finished disc. I've rough ground this whole pad here with my coarser disc, and I'm switching back to the fine disc to do the finishing. And so as you can see, it's creating a whole lot less dust, and I'm trying to get it to the finished product here. So I'm taking a little more time and being careful, trying to get the grind marks out and get it as low as I can go. There's still quite a few low spots here. I wasn't able to get all the low spots out, so it ends up with an interesting texture. It kind of looks like leopard spots or something. Kind of cool, actually. But certainly I wasn't able to get every low spot out, so it'll definitely have some character. Well, it's about 7 o'clock in the evening, and I've been working outside for a couple hours now, using a lot of power. I've been running a big vacuum cleaner and the evaporative cooler, and also the big 9-inch grinder, which uses about 1500 watts, I think. So altogether I'm using about 2200 watts, off and on for about 2 hours, and it's kind of late in the evening, so I wanted to see how the system was doing. And so I'm coming out here to check it and hook up to the BMS and see how the battery's doing. And it looks like we're doing great. We have 80% power still, so I was a little surprised, actually. I was thinking that I may have brought it down quite a ways, because for the last couple hours we haven't had direct sunlight, or as much direct sunlight, and so we're not producing as much power as I was using, drawing down the battery, but we're still doing great, only down to 80% and doing nice. Our solar panels produce 6400 watts total, and our inverter is rated at 6000 watts. Well, I'm moving on to the tub install. First thing I needed to do was to get the drain attached to the tub, and so I'm doing a little dry fitting here and getting that ready. I will say that as a do-it-yourselfer, as someone who doesn't do this kind of stuff for a living, this tub install was one of the most intimidating parts of this whole house build so far to me. I guess the reason why is because there's a part of the install that's really intense and stressful. When you go to make that final connection, you're doing it pretty much blind. It has to fit perfectly. It's a glued fitting, so you only have a couple seconds of dry time when that glue's setting to make that connection, make sure it's right. If you're wrong, you have to cut it all out and start all over again. And you add to that we're going to be doing a mortar set, which I'll explain later, but that's a one and done. Once you set it into that mortar, it can't be moved even a little bit. And so if you have to make any minor adjustments, it's pull the whole thing out and start all over again. So I found it really stressful. Well, just finishing up the drain install. You can see these parts I'm installing now have a matte black finish. We've decided to go with the matte black finish on all of our faucets and everything in this particular bathroom. That's a little bit of a questionable decision, maybe, considering the water here is a little bit hard, but we like the look of it. We'll see how it works. With that done, April and I are ready to bring it in for a test fit. I might mention here that the opening for the tub is about 4 inches wider than it needed to be, because we were planning on aircrete walls which were going to be thicker. So since the stick-built walls are thinner, we had a little extra room here, which is actually nice. It makes it easy to get the tub in and out. I'm checking the level here to see how it looks just sitting on the concrete floor, and it is acceptable. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's close enough that we're not going to worry about trying to shim it or anything. We will do the mortar set so that all of the feet touch perfectly underneath, but it's close enough. I just wanted to point out a few things about the tub that we're installing. So it has an apron on one side, and as you can see, here's the base. It's got these honeycomb reinforcements with these little dots here is actually where it sits on the concrete, and that's what supports the weight of the person that's in the tub. You can see they're at different heights along the length of it, where one side of the tub sits up higher and it all drains down to the drain. These are what needs to be, all of these points here are what need to be flat on the concrete so that the base is well supported. Since our concrete pad isn't perfectly flat, we're going to be using a little bit of a mortar set. So we'll put mortar about a ½ inch thick, and that way when we set these down, it ensures that all these points make contact with the floor. Some even may only make contact with the mortar, but when the mortar sets, it'll all be nice and solid. I also wanted to show you the drain that I installed. So when you're installing a tub, you have to install the drain on the tub first. And so I installed this yesterday, and now we're ready to do a dry fit to make sure it fits the plumbing that I have coming up through the rough opening. But this is a glued drain, so you can buy these to where they're either glue up or to where they're the compression fittings. I went ahead and did the glued fittings because it's a thicker pipe and it just seemed like a more robust quality set. And so that's what I did. I did, however, mess up, and that's the problem with using a glue set, is that if you don't get it right the first time, it's glued and you have to cut it. And so when I first put this in, I didn't have this piece quite straight, and it was cocked a little bit to the side, and I didn't realize that when I glued it up, found out later. And so to fix it, I had to actually cut the piece of pipe here and then put on this coupling. Fix it, put the coupling in, and redo it all. So that was a huge pain and a mistake I made, but I think we're ready to go now. I also wanted to show you the plumbing where it comes up through the foundation and mates up to the tub. So this was really interesting, kind of a new experience for us. One thing I hadn't expected is how deep it is. It's all way deep underneath the pad here. And, you know, it's well over a foot below the surface level of the pad. Got the drain line here, and then the P-trap connects here, and that goes down even deeper and then comes back up. So this is the pipe that will actually attach to the tub drain that I just showed you. And the next thing we're going to do is do a dry fit to make sure that this is in the right place and those two, you know, can make that connection. But it's really deep. You need some space to work on it and to be able to get down there to it. And once you put the tub in here, there'll be an apron on the front of the tub, and you won't be able to see or access any of that. So the only way to do this that I could think of is to make an access port in this wall, which actually goes into the pantry. So once we set the tub in, I'll be in the pantry reaching through here to actually make the connection. This will be the only way that I can see or work on anything once the tub is in place, which that makes it extra hard for sure.
Well, I've made a few adjustments, and we're going in for what we hope will be the final test fit, just to make sure everything is lined up perfectly, and we're ready for that super critical, extremely stressful final install. I ended up needing to make one adjustment to the pipe coming up out of the ground where the drain will connect to it. So once that adjustment was made, then I moved on to preparing the hole to put the tub in place. So I didn't like having a big, deep hole in the foundation underneath the tub that was just going to be sitting there, and we didn't really know what to do about it. So we ended up kind of doing our own thing. We put in a layer of plastic as a vapor barrier. That seemed like a good idea. And then I packed in a bunch of dirt around it and kind of filled up that cavity to better support the pipe. I'm packing this dirt in really tight just in order to provide some support for the pad that's in this area as well. When I originally dug that hole, it ended up undermining this area around the foundation because, you know, right underneath the slab there is a layer of gravel, and a lot of that gravel fell into the hole, and so I ended up having to repack all that in. So I spent a good amount of time filling that in and packing it in tightly just so everything's supported again, and I'll feel good about leaving it in this condition. Once I've filled in the cavity as much as I can and packed it in thoroughly, we decided to, as a final precaution, add in some pest control chemicals. So we added a little Raid and Borax just to kind of preemptively slow down any pests that might want to come in through there. Hopefully that won't be a problem. Now we're doing the final prep on the tub. We needed to install these apron supports. These were really easy to install. They just push into place and keep the apron rigid. And the other thing we had to do to the tub was install clips. So these clips had to be taped on because you can't put them on after the fact. They have to be taped into place so that when you slide it in, they're in the correct location. Well, it's go time. Finally time for the final installation here. I'm mixing up the mortar in preparation. This is just a homemade mortar mix we're doing with some Portland cement and sand. Once this is mixed and on the floor, there's no going back. So the clock is now ticking. So I'm in a hurry to get this installed, get a nice thin layer of this. I'm kind of targeting about a ½ inch thickness over the base surface area of the tub. It doesn't have to go all the way up to the walls. It just needs to cover the area where those little feet are. and I want it at least half an inch thick. So it's not a precision thing, so I just put it on roughly, got it down. We put some plastic down over it so that we would be able to remove it at some future date. Hopefully, that'll be 20 years down the road, but make it easy to remove later. And then we set it in place. This part was really stressful. We set it down. I ran around and got in the pantry so I could guide it in. April gently pushed it down into the mortar as I guided the pipe in. And I was really scared at first. It didn't seem like it had went in and that I had a good connection. So I ran and got a light and a mirror and then looked down under there because I can't see anything. It's several inches down. Anyway, ended up working out okay. We got a good, clean connection and I'm happy with it. A little walk in nature always helps me de-stress. Here you can see our pond. We love the pond, and you can see tadpoles in it. These tadpoles are really cool. They actually eat the mosquito larvae, so we have very few mosquitoes. Back to the grind real quick. I'm making good progress on this living room pad area. Almost done with the final sand. I'm over to the closet, so just a little bit left, and we'll be done with this entire great room. After a couple days to let the mortar dry, we brought in the garden hose and filled up the bathtub a few inches high and then opened up the drain to do a test on the drain to make sure there were no leaks. So I got back in behind there with my mirror and flashlight, checked everything out real good. It all looked great, no leaks. Now I'm moving on to attaching those tabs that I had taped onto the outside of the rail on this tub to these studs. So I'm screwing those in and then bending the tab over. I'm sure different tubs have different attachment methods, but that's the way the tabs worked on this one. I might mention here too that we had some comments from viewers that the galvanized that I had previously installed on this faucet and shower part were a bad idea, that they rusted out and that there was a conflict between the different metals. And so we researched that was correct, and so we decided to go ahead and remove the galvanized, and I will be replacing that with all brass. Well, the tub install is complete. I think that'll be the worst part of this little process here. Of course, we still have to finish up the plumbing and the shower enclosure, but those shouldn't be as bad. A quick look at temperatures. It's 95 degrees outside, and inside it's only 79 degrees with the evaporative cooler going, so we're able to cool this house with about 350 watts that the evaporative cooler uses, so it's working out great. Well, the great room is done on the grinding, and now I'm moving on to the final rooms in the house that I have to grind, which is the master bath and closet. This is a really confined space, and there's not as much ventilation in here. There's only one window, which of course we have open, and we have the evaporative cooler going, which is pushing air through here, but there's still a lot of dust accumulating, so I brought in a fan to kind of push that air out and increase the circulation, increase the ventilation as much as possible, but it's still quite dusty in here. This part of the pad was actually pretty smooth and is cleaning up really nicely, cleaning up faster than some other areas of the house did. Well, I'm finally done with grinding, and this is really exciting because this is the last really messy part of the project. And so great to have that done, and so I've transitioned to cleaning stuff off, which I actually really like to do. So we swept and vacuumed everything out really good, and then I started working on a little setup for my air hose. I wanted to create an extension for my air nozzle, and so I taped the air nozzle open and put it on a paint stick so that I could get that air nozzle up close to everything that I wanted to blow off. And so then I just spent a good amount of time blowing the floors off, blowing the walls, the ceiling, everything. There's just dust everywhere, coating everything thick. And so this was so fun actually to take some time and blow it all off, get everything clean. It feels so nice to get that part of the project done, blowing off the cabinets and everything, getting the windows cleaned off. This was really nice to move on from the dirty part of the project. I even blew off the gravel, although the gravel ends up swallowing a lot of the dust and stuff. Anything that was on top I still blew out, just trying to get everything as completely clean and dust-free as possible. I'm so looking forward to working in a dust-free environment. Looking forward to being able to take off my mask and work in the house without a mask. I feel like it's been a permanent fixture on my face for a long time. I've went through 3 sets of filters. Looking forward to moving on.
So it's July 7th. Red and I decided we're going to take the day off today and do some trimming. We're going to trim around the road, get rid of some of the little mesquite that are coming up in places we don't need them, and decided this would be a good time before things get too grown up, hoping to get some trimming done.
About once a year we need to cut back the mesquite trees. They encroach on the driveway so bad that it'll scratch cars as they go by. And so about once a year we have to come and trim everything back a little bit. This seemed like a good time. It's at the beginning of the monsoon season before everything gets so overgrown. If we waited till later it would be really thick in here. You can see I'm wearing snake chaps here. I like to wear snake chaps anytime we're walking through thick brush or grass and we can't see where we're stepping. Snakes are generally friendly, but if you step on them they're going to try to strike you. We just showed a little bit of that, but we actually spent several hours and trimmed a large portion of the driveway there. Once that was completed, we moved on to a couple trees that are close to the house that we wanted to trim down and weed out some of the bushes from around the tree to clear out around the base of the tree so that tree could have more space to thrive. We want these trees to grow, and so we plan to water these trees, and so we want them to have a clear space and not be in competition with other vegetation. The particular tree that we're working on here is on the west side of our house, so it provides shade on from that west evening sun. And so this is a tree that we would really like to grow, and so that's one of the reasons why we're focusing on this tree, trimming it back, clearing it out. We're going to water this tree also, and of course the monsoon's coming. So anyway, we want to really encourage this tree to grow so that it'll give us even more shade from that evening sun. Mesquite trees have the potential to grow to 40 or 50 feet tall and be a full-size, gorgeous tree, and so that's what we're hoping to encourage this one to do. This is another tree that we worked on. This one is close to the parking area, and so it'll provide evening shade for the cars in the parking area. And so we've trimmed it down, and now April has her little mulcher out, and she's starting to mulch some of the branches, and she'll put that mulch around the trees that we planted. Thank you for watching. In our next video, we'll be finishing the concrete floors and we'll show you how those look. We'll also be moving on to painting, bathroom enclosure, and all kinds of other fun activities.